When you think about the scariest cryptid, a number might come to your mind. Maybe these stories of aggressive Sasquatches attacking people, like in the infamous Ape Canyon incident. Or perhaps the stories of divers and swimmers being attacked and eaten by the Lusca, a giant octopus in the Bahamas. But to me, the scariest cryptid is the giant jellyfish. Now, normal jellyfish can already get pretty terrifying, especially since they are some of the most deadly venomous animals in the world. But giant jellyfish are terrifying on an almost Lovecraftian level. To demonstrate why, I've collected a few stories of giant jellyfish encounters from around the world. The first story about the giant jellyfish comes from a diver named Christopher Loeb. It was published in the 1967 book Great World Mysteries, but the sighting happened in 1953. The diver was testing out a new deep-sea diving suit when he encountered something strange in the water. Here's how the book described the encounter. All the way down, I was followed by a 15-foot shark, which circled around full of curiosity, but made no attempt to attack. I kept wondering how far down he would go. He was still hanging around some 30 feet from me, and about 20 feet higher, when I reached a ledge below which was a great black chasm of enormous depth. It being dangerous to venture farther, I stood looking into the chasm while the shark waited for my next move. Suddenly, the water became distinctly colder. While the temperature continued to drop with surprising rapidity, I saw a black mass rising from the darkness of the chasm. It floated upwards very slowly. As at last light reached it, I could see that it was of dull brown color and tremendous size, a flat, ragged-edged thing about 1 acre in extent. It pulsated sluggishly, and I knew that it was alive despite its lack of visible limbs or eyes. Still pulsating, this frightful vision floated past my level, by which time the coldness had become most intense. The shark now hung completely motionless, paralyzed either by cold or fear. While I watched, fascinated, the enormous brown thing reached the shark, contacting him with its upper surface. The shark gave a convulsive shiver and was drawn unresisting into the substance of the monster. I stood perfectly still, not daring to move, while the brown thing sank back into the chasm as slowly as it had emerged. Darkness swallowed it, and the water started to regain some warmth. God knows what this thing was, but I had no doubt that it had been born of the primeval slime countless fathoms below. This encounter was later backed by a Chilean hydrographic team, who stated that they had seen a similar black mass near an abyssal trench. The story is considered by some to be the inspiration for the infamous Black Carpet 4chan story. In that tale, a large mass is seen hunting things on the seafloor. Regardless, there's a bit of mystery to this mystery, as although the book seems to be quoting a newspaper article of some kind, the original article the encounter was told in has never been located. So for the lost media enthusiasts in the audience, feel free to track that down. Another sighting reminiscent of the black carpet jellyfish came south of Bermuda in 1969. It was reported by Bermuda Triangle enthusiast Richard Winner while he was doing oceanographic work with another man named Pat Boatwright. Here's how he described the encounter. I had just finished filming the movement of an instrumentation buoy in rough seas. The last of my film had run through the camera when my safety diver, Pat Boatwright, grabbed me by the shoulder and pointed downward. It was late in the afternoon, and the rough seas were distorting the light that penetrated into the depths. What I saw was phenomenal. How deep it was, or its size, I couldn't tell. It might have been 100 feet beneath us, maybe 150 feet. Its size I could only guess at, maybe 100 feet across, possibly 75, but no less than 50 feet in diameter. It was perfectly round. Its color was a deep purple. It was moving slowly up toward us. At its outer perimeter, there was a form of pulsation, but there was no movement of water. As we started for the surface, it stopped its ascent. Then slowly, it began to descend into the blackening depths. Awe-stricken, we watched until it was no more. Pat Boatwright thought that it could have been a squid, but Winner thought that it was a giant jellyfish. One detail not in that report was that the edges of the jellyfish were pink. In 2005, a French diver named Henry Astor and his companion were swimming off the coast of Thailand. They were in a diving cage when they spotted a strange brown mass. As it rose from the depths and approached a group of fish, the fish froze and fell onto their sides before being consumed by the mass. The radar for the ship they were working with then recorded a large object in the water. Henry's partner left and began to swim down toward the mass out of curiosity. 15 minutes later, he hadn't returned, and by the time rescuers arrived, the brown mass was gone. Henry never saw the mass again, despite visiting the spot multiple times. Before we get to the final example, there are two absolutely horrifying giant jellyfish sightings that I think are hoaxes, and I'll get into why. The first is about a French fisherman named Henry Bicel, who told the police that he was swimming with his wife and 2 children in the Bay of Biscay when they were attacked by a jellyfish the size of an automobile. He was the only survivor of the attack, which the police were apparently and understandably skeptical of, detaining him on murder charges. But since he passed a polygraph test, according to the story, he was set free. The problem for this story, outside of polygraph tests being inaccurate, is that cryptozoologist Carl Schuker traced it to a single tabloid article. Since there's no other information or even sources for this incident outside of that article, I think it's safe to say that this was a very inventive writer's creation. The second, and one of the most famous giant jellyfish sightings, is the SS Kuranda sighting. According to this story, the ship was traveling through turbulent waters when it seemed to bump into something. The head of the ship then stayed underwater for an unusually long time. When an officer checked on the ship, he found that a massive jellyfish had attached itself to it. When its tentacle touched a crew member, he fell to the ship screaming, and his body appeared as if he had been scalded by hot water. Luckily, another ship in the area, the Hercules, came to their rescue. It fired water hoses at the monster until it detached itself from the ship, and the SS Kuranda was able to escape. The administrator of the Cryptid Archive wiki found some issues with this story. For starters, there seems to be no record of the captain who was supposedly named Langley Smith existing. Additionally, the SS Kuranda was actually renamed a few years before the incident supposedly happened in 1973, though the story gives no mention of this. There also are no other sources for this story besides the book Sea Monsters, a collection of eyewitness accounts. To top it all off, there are also similar issues with the other cryptid sightings in that book as well, as none of them seem to have any other verification outside of the book. The final sighting of a giant jellyfish-like creature occurred in the 1970s, although the story wasn't actually told until the 1990s. It was then when cryptozoologist Chad Armand read about the encounter on an internet news group, and then asked the user for more details. Here's what the user said. I used to have a friend who was at one time an undersea welder for Gulf Oil in the 70s, and did work on the oil rigs way out in the Gulf of Mexico. He gave it up because he was seeing things down there that were beyond his ability to comprehend and even describe, and he wasn't the only one. At one oil rig, the welding crew were getting used to seeing this giant headless glowing living fire hose that would zoom in from out of nowhere at incredible NASCAR speeds and would keep on zooming past the welders for up to 15 minutes. My friend then said he finally saw what 8 giant headless glowing living fire hoses one scary day and caught the first helicopter back to shore. He never saw the ocean ever again and was thankful. Armand then asked for more details, and the user responded with, my friend George Hale, who died in 1994, was unable to describe the predator in detail. It was too big and too close to him. It was as big to him as you are to an ant. As a matter of fact, he had to ascend pretty darn quickly because he was in fear of being crushed like a bug. But the predator had a pallor and skin texture like a sea anemone, and it might have been built along the lines of a starfish or a freshwater pond hydra, and it was eating the fire hose entity by swallowing it. Its method of propulsion is a mystery. So hopefully now you understand why I consider giant jellyfish to be the scariest cryptids. One thing I did find ironic is that basically all of the cryptid reports that are under the giant jellyfish label aren't really jellyfish at all, but rather just large undescribed predators that somewhat resemble jellyfish. Anyways, thank you for watching. Huge shout out to my Patreons John, Timothy, and the YouTube channel Wild World. If you'd like to support me, my Patreon will be linked in the description below. If you want to see more cryptid videos, I'll have a playlist of them in the description as well. If you want to see a scarier cryptid video, I did a collaboration with Wild World about giant spider sightings, and that'll be in the description as well. I'd also appreciate it if you left your thoughts as to what the scariest cryptid sighting in this video was. That's all for this video. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you in the next one.